from the autistic's perspective, if you go your whole life with people working on your deficits, things you can't do, don't do well, um, uh, don't even want to learn, like tying your shoes or as um, being able to do a social greeting of "Hi, how are you? I'm fine. How are you?" The routine social things, and that is like so boring and it's distracting and it's like, why do I want to learn that? And yet that's what they feel obliged to teach you, and this leads to frustration.
Hi, I'm Staci Neustadt. I am a speech language pathologist and the CEO at Making Sense of Autism, and I'm a student of Susan.
And I'm Susan Golubock. I am a now retired occupational therapist who has worked many, many years after I discovered even my own autism with other autistic individuals. I founded Making Sense of Autism because of my passion to not only understand my brain and how it worked differently, but to try to explain what I've learned to other people so that they're more understanding and therefore more accepting and more accommodating to autistic individuals.
So, our goal is to help you provide the right support without trying to fix autism, but by understanding it. So, whether you're a parent, teacher, therapist, or just someone who wants to learn, you're in the right place. Be sure to subscribe and join us every week. We talk about a new topic. So, a lot of people tell us that they're already neuro-affirming, which is awesome. And neuro-affirming means that they're trauma informed and they look at strengths and they look at what the individual needs and the support that they need. But oftentimes they might think, oh, we don't need another framework. But
Mm.
from what I've seen, and even just feedback we've gotten or in posts that I see on social media, those same people are often frustrated with traditional assessments, the standardized assessments that they have to complete, or even the non-standardized assessment. I know as a speech therapist, we have the functional communication profile and the communication matrix, but I see that sometimes people are still lost because they aren't really sure what to do with these results. So why do you think that happens, and what can they do? What can we offer to kind of help them?
Well, you have to remember that most standardized tests, first of all, are standardized on so that every child is supposed to achieve at certain age of the certain thing. And so because they're deficit based, which simply means if they can't or haven't yet achieved something, that should become their goal. And I think this is what's frustrating them, is that they're setting their goals on what the tools they've been given are said they're supposed to be doing. And this is what insurance pays for, to fix them, to
Yeah.
help them achieve where they're not doing. But from the autistic's perspective, if you go your whole life with people working on your deficits, things you can't do, don't do well, um, uh, don't even want to learn, like tying your shoes or as um, being able to do a social greeting of "Hi, how are you? I'm fine. How are you?" The routine social things, and that is like so boring and it's distracting and it's like, why do I want to learn that? And yet that's what they feel obliged to teach you, and this leads to frustration. And instead of, if you can look at things from the autistic perspective, the brain works differently. Our goal is not to achieve normalcy, because that's way out of our league right now. We're not expected. All you're doing is teaching us to mask, to pretend to be, I mean, I can learn to memorize anything. I've done that in classes just to pass the test, but I don't ever use that information. Is of no value to me. And I think this is what they're seeing by um, autistics don't tend to generalize, i.e., use what they've learned in settings outside of the setting in which they were taught. Because we were taught this is what you do in this setting with this person, and it's ridiculous, but this is what you got to do to get through, to survive. And that's the frustration.
Absolutely. I mean, I know I get frustrated if people have expectations of me that don't work with how my brain works, especially my poor working memory. I have barriers, so I need accommodation. So I definitely see that. And so our pattern right now is we see deficits, we create goals. And don't get me wrong, like you said, there's some autistics who will comply, especially if you give a reward. They're going to memorize and do that thing because of the reward, but not because they want to learn the skill. And as you mentioned, as the occupational therapist, like tying shoes, well, if the ultimate goal is to put shoes on and get them to stay, does it really have to be with tying? You know, it could be zippers, it could be Velcro, lots of different things. I think about that with some of the assessments as speech therapists that we do is, you know, looking at vocabulary, synonyms, antonyms. And I know, especially when I assess autistic individuals, those synonyms and antonyms, you know, the words that mean the same or opposite, they might
Mhm,
have a word that is pretty close, but not quite. And so then they get it wrong, which is
mhm.
not really showing their true skills. So another thing that I hear is I already know my clients' strengths, but when we look at their responses of what their clients' strengths are, usually it's surface related, like reading or
Mhm,
drawing,
mhm,
rather than deeper things like persistence,
mhm.
sensory seeking, attention to detail. Why is it so important that we go deeper?
Well, there's underlying neurological reasons why the autistic individual insists on routine. Look, everybody functions better when they have routines. Everybody develops routines because it makes life easier. You don't have to stop and think about and plan everything that you do in your life. Now, some people find routine boring and they seek to go outside and do things that are different. And that's okay. You can seek it, but you've got to have that foundation of feeling that there's some consistency in the world so that when things kind of chaotic, you've got a base to go to. But autistics don't feel that consistency because our brain doesn't work consistently. So if what we lack internally, what feels like our brain sometimes works this way and sometimes works that way. Sometimes we take in too much information, are overwhelmed. Sometimes we don't take in enough and we're confused and lost. Um, we seek it. That's only natural that we seek it, at least from the environment and other people in the environment. At least help me feel some consistency, some solid foundation of feeling secure and not stressed. How can one learn when you're in a state of constant stress? And that's the other thing we forget to look at is are our teaching methods, are the goals we're picking causing them to feel stressed? Why am I learning this? It's just adding one more, is adding more to my brain to have to remember that is useless to me.
Yeah.
And that's creating stress, coming up with goals that don't align with what we need or want to learn to function, or the way you teach it. We've got to relook at all of that, those things, not just set goals to fix the person so that they learn all these things that people want them to learn to do and to be able to perform like robots.
That makes so much sense. So I'm thinking, you know, when we focus on their strengths, that reduces that extra cognitive load of not only trying to figure out how you're trying to teach me, if you know that routine and predictability are a strength of mine and you use that to teach me something. Maybe it means I'm teaching the same skill over and over again for several sessions in a row. And so it's the predictable routine and exploring
Mhm.
it. And so that makes a lot of sense because then we're not layering all of these different skills and brain functions the autistic individual needs to access. We're giving them what they need with truly how their brain works. Find that the assessments we do don't pick up on the barriers, those soft skills, those street smarts, which oftentimes that is what's getting in the way of achieving some goals. Don't get me wrong, I find that there's two things. There's the barriers, those soft skills that are missing, or the goal is just not motivating.
Developmentally, those preschool years, when a child is learning through self-initiated play, that's what play is all about, is when you learn. Now, you also learn from play through with your peers. And there, you learn a lot of what we call soft skills, i.e., street smarts, things you just pick up and you know because you've experienced it. You get it. Oh, if you do something wrong, your peer's going to get upset with you. So okay, I guess I won't do it that way. I'll decide whether I want to play with them or leave, or you learn all these kinds of social skills. Well, because of our sensory issues and the difficulty of making quick, easy connections, autistics miss out on developing these, what I call soft skills. These are personal skills that enable you to have some intuitively know what's going on, um, and pick up things that other people do but don't articulate, don't ever tell you. But you kind of pick up, and I kind of know that this is a good thing, that's not such a good thing. If autistics don't pick up on that, we're missing those soft skills. Now, how is that going to help us get through life? We can know all the facts we want in the world, and we're good at learning facts. But if we don't have the street smarts to know when to use them, with who not to use them, when to stop, when to, all those things that come intuitively to most kids, they pick it up. We see what we call socially inappropriate behavior, i.e., we are aware that there are unwritten social rules, but we've never picked them up. We don't know what they are unless someone tells us concretely, because we don't intuitively pick things up. So those soft skills are getting in our way of using the facts that you're teaching us, the hard skills, as I call them, things that you have to teach that no child doesn't, they don't pick up intuitively. Someone has to teach them. Those are hard skills.
The only way I have seen this to be done is literally learning how the autistic brain works, which we do. We talk about every week when we have our conversations. We talk about in our courses that we have. And it is such a mindset shift that it doesn't shift our brains in one lesson, one conversation. It is such a different point of view that we have to kind of keep learning how that difference presents itself.
Mhm.
If you're using our framework as an assessment tool, we mentioned the strength of routine and predictability, but in that same conversation or same, observation or documentation of this individual, it might be that they get triggered when things change. And so you can actually build on that strength and predictability, but make small adjustments by making small changes, which is they might get triggered by it, but really, if we are teaching the problem solving skill, which is the barrier, it's a soft skill that hasn't developed yet. We're teaching that skill, that potential strength of maybe wanting to be more flexible will be achieved. And those are those 4 areas we're talking about. And we just talked about one skill. We're tapping into the strength. of routine will be addressing the trigger of maybe being inflexible by supporting the barrier of not knowing how to problem solve so that eventually the potential strength, they become more flexible and are able to problem solve and then hence can have routine with change. And so I hope people are seeing the importance of assessing individuals in a different way,
Mhm.
assessing individuals with these four areas. And we dig a lot deeper into the barriers because I don't think people realize how often these soft skills impact you achieving a goal. And so these four areas we have found are so essential. And the coolest thing, which is at the top of our framework, is you get more engagement and you achieve goals, which is by far the biggest barrier that therapists have is because they either say my client won't engage with me or they know deep inside, wow, we've had this same goal for year after year and they're not achieving it. Or they get a new set of goals and they're like, oh, wow, this child is not even ready for these goals yet. So if someone is saying, well, I'm already neuroaffirming, I already know my client's strengths, what do you want them to take away from this conversation today?
You may have identified what you perceive as strengths, but to be neuroaffirming, you have got to get inside the autistic brain, value and appreciate and work with the brain and the way it learns. And you're going to see an instant change in the connectivity that the individual has with you. They'll feel understood and valued, and in their ability to learn, because you're starting with what they already know what they already can do. And that's a tremendous foundation for learning the next step. But if you're going from step 1 to step 10 without, uh, if you don't understand the autistic brain and how it works, and then I'm sorry, you can't be neuroaffirming. You can be lip service to it. You say you recognize it, but neuroaffirming means you have to affirm the neurology, the brain, the way it works, and value and accept the way it works. And if you haven't delved into how it works, how it's different um, than the way you are, you're still going to be imposing your perspective on them. And you're not going to get the results you want.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Well, thank you for the great advice, Sue.
Okay, thanks for asking, Staci.